From 2006 to 2008, I was a student at a university in England, studying paramedic science. This course was a 2-year fast track into becoming a qualified paramedic, EMT. The course involved placements at various points throughout both years. First, we spent an evening/night at a dispatcher's. I'll never forget some of those calls. An example being a man waking up in bed next to his wife who had died during the night. Next, we were stationed with the patient transport service, taking patients to their hospital appointments when they couldn't get there alone. Finally, after waiting a good 6 months for the opportunity, it was time to spend a prolonged placement with the 999 crews. You could choose from a couple of preferred locations, and I was fortunate enough to be given the ambulance station close to my home. So I moved back to my parents' home that winter for a full term, leaving my university buddies behind. In hindsight, I wish I hadn't, because it turned out to give me a far less interesting experience. The station was in Buxton, Derbyshire. Google Map it. It's in the middle of nowhere territory. It's also 45 minutes from the nearest hospital, so you better not get hurt badly when up there. Only people did. One evening we responded to a call where a guy had fallen off his bike on the Cat and Fiddle Run. It's named after a pub by the same name on that road, which passes over the Pennines Mountains. Bikers love to boot it up and down. It's notorious. The guy broke a brick wall with his body. Legs were over his shoulders. We took him with blue lights to the aforementioned hospital. I don't think he survived. This is where things got messed up. We turn out of the hospital, travel maybe half a mile, and get flagged down by a pedestrian. She shouts through the window that someone has been beaten badly. We later find out that this was a case of somebody bumping into somebody else in a bar. Nothing more. At that exact moment, a guy in a red t-shirt stumbles out from a side street and collapses in the road. I had been in the rear passenger seat of the patient compartment, my mentor and her technician riding up front. They get out before me to help him, whilst I open the side bay. Stupidly, I climb out as my mentor helps him in. That's the point at which I notice 2 things. He isn't wearing a red t-shirt. He's topless and saturated head to waist in his own blood. And there's a mob of people heading straight at us. Maybe 10, maybe 15. I forget. I'm still outside the ambulance and pretty much frozen in terror. I'm only 19 at this point and a pussy. This was 2007. Thankfully, my mentor hauls me inside and locks the door instantly. She then turns to me and asks if the rear door is locked. It is not. They open it from the outside. My mentor pushes them back, heckles them, telling them to pick on a group of people and not just one man. I couldn't believe it. She then manages to lock the door. What happens next will stick with me forever, and as clearly as I'm telling this story nearly 10 years on. They begin to try and flip the ambulance. Meanwhile, another guy starts hammering the side window, shattering it, cuts himself wide open with blood everywhere, but keeps going. They were animals. There's a window between the rear and the front cabin. We see a police car approaching. He doesn't stop and continues straight past. UK cops don't carry guns. I don't blame him for not stopping. Only later did I find out that the keys were still in the ignition, but nobody attempted to enter the cabin through sheer luck. After this, I finished my course and went off and became an English teacher instead. The number of dead bodies I saw in that time is enough to haunt me for life. To all you brave service folk, I commend you. For a bit of backstory, my mom was dating an abusive prick at the time. We'll call him Ian. Because of Ian and the crazy fights they'd gotten into, we couldn't lock up my house at all. He had kicked in both the front door and the back door to the house and they were never fixed. My mother and Ian were at the bar all day, every day. I tell you this so you will know why the house wasn't locked up, and where my parents were when this happened. This incident occurred when I was around 12 years old, and my little brother around 10. I was a really small girl, and at this age my brother was sick all the time, so he was very, very tiny and frail. My mother and Ian were at the bar as usual. When you opened my front door, it put you into the living room, and you could see the back door. There was a hallway to the right that led back into the bedrooms, and that is where my brother and I were. We were in his bedroom with the door closed, playing something on the PlayStation. It was around midnight or 1 a.m., and we were playing and having a good time when I heard a weird noise. My brother didn't hear it, and I didn't want to creep him out. I told him that I wanted to go get a drink, and told him to stay in the room and I would bring him something. To get to my kitchen, you would have to walk down the hallway, in front of both the front and back door, because it was behind the living room. I kept hearing strange noises, so before I left my brother's room, I told him to get into the closet to work on our fort, so that it would be ready when I was getting our drinks and a snack. I raised my little brother for the most part, and took care of him. I had a terrible feeling, a sense of dread. I could tell something wasn't right, and this was the way to get my brother to hide without scaring him. He frightened easily and had really bad asthma attacks, and at the time we had no inhaler or his breathing treatment machine for him. Good going, Ma. I knew if he started having an asthma attack on top of being scared, it wouldn't be pretty. I left the back of my room and decided to see what was going on, because I was such a badass at 12 years old, but I had to protect my little brother. I start sneaking up the hallway as slowly and quietly as I could. I was terrified. I could feel that something was wrong. Before I made it to the end of the hallway, I hear a man. It sounded like he was growling. It was a deep, terrifying noise. I can't explain it, but the feeling that washed over me damn near made me puke. So I, of course, freeze. I have no one in this town. I don't know anyone, and my dad is living in a different state, and my mom is at a bar drunk as hell. I was sitting there trying to gather the courage to see what was around the corner, and going over my other options when I hear my brother's door open. He sees me and the look on my face, and freezes. I remember his eyes going so wide with fear, because he must have heard the growl or whatever it was too. I motion with my hands to go back into the room, and he does. I gather the courage to peek around the corner, and what I saw still freaks me out to this day. It was horrifying. I saw a man, probably over 6 feet tall and pushing 300 pounds, sitting on my couch with a wicked grin on his face. That grin and the look in his eyes will forever be burned in my mind. By some stupid luck, the man didn't see me. I slowly, so slowly, snuck back to my brother's room. I slowly shut the door and started going over my options. My little brother was already horrified because of the growling noise this man was making. I am so thankful he wasn't the one who saw what was out there. I mustered my big brave sister face and calmly told him that there was a man I didn't know on the couch, and he needed to be very quiet, and I needed him to be brave and keep his breathing in check. My little brother adored me and looked up to me, so when I told him I needed him to be brave, he tried his best. I told him not to move, and he didn't. The first thing I tried was the window, but it wouldn't budge. It was completely stuck. I'm making myself stay calm for my brother's sake, but I know what's sitting out there. So since the window was stuck, I decided to start looking for a weapon. My older brother lived here, and I know he had swords somewhere. I don't remember where he was. As I'm looking for a weapon, I hear the man sing, "I know you're in there." Fuck. My stomach knotted up. The hair on the back of my neck raised, and I instantly got a cold sweat. And then I hear it. My little brother had started wheezing. Asthma attack. Fuck, fuck, fuck. I hugged him, reminded him about being brave, and told him to sit and focus on his breathing. I started frantically trying to get my window open, but it was stuck. I looked around and started moving blankets, when I found my older brother's cell phone that he always forgot. I remember thinking that I was lucky, and I felt a bit of relief. I immediately called the police and told them what was going on, hysterical at this point, but still remaining quiet. The dispatcher told me to remain on the phone so she could hear what was happening when the man started banging on our bedroom door. It had been about 5 minutes into the phone call when this happened, and I could no longer remain calm. I fucking lost it. I started screaming. I mean blood-curdling screaming. The kind of screaming that would send chills down your spine if you heard it. I forgot to mention that our bedroom had the only working lock, so the door was locked, but he was banging on the door trying to get in. His banging got louder and louder. He was screaming to let him in when it went completely silent. Then he did the creepiest, most terrifying thing ever. He started fucking laughing. "You know I could bust down this door in about 2 seconds, right, little girl?" Now he's lightly knocking on the door and asking for me to open it. His demeanor completely changed. I then heard a scraping at the door. What I had imagined in my 12-year-old head was he was scraping the door with his really long fingernails or something. But that wasn't the case. Then I heard the police start screaming at him to get to the ground, put his hands up, etc. I heard him put up a fight, followed by more yelling and eventually silence. After a few minutes there was a knock at the door, but at this point I was too terrified to open it. I thought this nightmare guy was still there. So being in my hysterical state, I started screaming, "No, no, please!" over and over again, sobbing and shaking. I couldn't stay brave for my little brother anymore. I was on the floor holding him this whole time, convinced we were going to die. Eventually I calmed myself a bit, and this time a female officer was at the door, so I opened it. There were about 5 cops standing in the hallway listening to me being hysterical. I refused to let go of my brother at this point, but we both ran to this female officer and just collapsed sobbing hysterically. We had been so scared. It turns out this guy was completely wasted and high on drugs. I remember the cops walking up to him and having me stand up in front of him to ask if I knew this man. I didn't, but I'll never forget standing in front of this huge man, looking into his brown eyes that were completely bloodshot and filled with hatred. I'll never forget that growling noise that he was making, or the look of pure horror in my little brother's eyes. My parents were called, and investigated for leaving us alone like that, and for the doors being like that. My mom is a different person now, doesn't drink and is now married to a cop. She completely changed. I remember asking her about it later on, and she told me something that I didn't know. The man had had a huge knife, so that's what he was scraping the door with. Also, he had some rope, tape, and a tarp. I still don't know how he didn't get us, or why he didn't just bust the door down to get us. It would have taken one half-assed kick from him to bust the door down. It was super thin. It still creeps me out, and I have nightmares from it. My husband doesn't understand why I get so furious with him when he leaves the door unlocked at night. I work 3rd shift, so I'll come home and the door will be unlocked. It's infuriating because then I have to go through every room in the house and check the closets and other spaces that a person could hide in. I have 2 kids, and they will never, ever go through what I did. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And if you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. And if you would like to help support the channel and get some merchandise or get some cool perks on Patreon, make sure you go check out my Spreadshirt or Patreon. I appreciate everyone checking out this video. And for everyone that joined me on the live stream this weekend as well for the little bit I was up, thank you for that too. That was a lot of fun. Got to read some stories live, and got to hang out with some of you. So if you missed it and you don't have your notifications turned on for the channel, make sure you turn those on, because occasionally I'll just live stream out of nowhere. And a lot of times I just keep the video unlisted once it's done. Yes. Although I think I'm going to put a link up for my Patreon supporters. I think that makes sense. I will catch you all in the next video. which will probably be the next segment to the asylum stories. So keep your eyes out for that. Bad bye. No, please, no! I can't do it today. What am I talking about? It still creeps me. It still creeps.